In the late 1960s, the city was changing. Old neighborhoods were evolving. Institutions that had once seemed untouchable carried an aura of certainty and trust. Among the most respected figures in Baltimore's Catholic community was a young nun named Sister Cathy Cesnik. Everyone called her Cathy. She was only 26 years old. She taught English and drama. She loved music, poetry, and conversation. Former students remembered her as warm, approachable, and different from many authority figures around her. Then in November of 1969, Cathy vanished. Weeks later, her body was discovered in a remote area outside the city. The murder was never solved. For decades, her death remained one more cold case buried in police files. But as the years passed, former students began speaking about something far darker. Allegations of sexual abuse, claims of intimidation, stories of silence enforced through fear. What started as an investigation into the murder of a beloved teacher slowly became an examination of power, secrecy, and the cost of telling the truth. This is the story explored in The Keepers, a story that stretches across generations, a story that remains unresolved, and a story that forced an entire community to confront its past. Background: Catherine Ann Cesnik was born in 1942. At a young age, she joined the School Sisters of Notre Dame and committed herself to religious life. By the late 1960s, she was teaching at Archbishop Keough High School, an all-girls Catholic school in Baltimore. Former students consistently described her as compassionate and supportive. Many trusted her deeply. At a time when questioning authority was uncommon, Cathy encouraged students to think independently. She listened, she cared, she made an impression that would last for decades. By 1969, however, Cathy was going through changes in her own life. She had taken a leave from the convent and was living outside religious housing. She remained committed to teaching, but she was exploring her future and considering what direction her life might take. Friends remembered her as optimistic. There was little indication that anything was wrong. Then came the night of November 7th, 1969. The disappearance. That evening, Cathy left her apartment to run errands. She planned to purchase a gift. She also intended to stop for groceries. It was an ordinary trip. Nothing about the evening appeared unusual, but Cathy never returned home. Concern grew quickly. Friends and colleagues began searching for answers. Her car was discovered near her apartment complex. The vehicle had been abandoned. Cathy was nowhere to be found. Police launched an investigation. Missing person cases are often difficult in the earliest hours. Investigators had few leads, few witnesses, and no clear indication of what had happened. Days turned into weeks. Still, there was no sign of Cathy. Then on January 3rd, 1970, the case took a devastating turn. The discovery. A hunter made a grim discovery in a wooded area near Lansdowne, Maryland. The body was identified as Sister Cathy Cesnik. The young teacher had suffered fatal blunt force injuries. The news shocked Baltimore. A beloved nun had been murdered. Yet despite the seriousness of the crime, investigators struggled to identify a suspect. Evidence was limited. Witnesses were scarce. The case stalled. As months became years, the murder remained unsolved. For many people, it seemed likely that the truth would never be known. But beneath the surface, another story was waiting to emerge. The allegations. More than 2 decades later, former students from Archbishop Keough High School began publicly discussing experiences they had carried for years. Among them was Joan Hargadon Weiner. She alleged that while she attended the school, she had been sexually abused by Father Joseph Maskell. Maskell served as the school's chaplain and counselor. Over time, other women came forward with similar allegations. The accusations painted a disturbing picture. Former students described abuse occurring under the authority of a trusted religious figure. Some alleged that complaints were ignored. Others believed influential individuals had helped protect reputations instead of victims. These allegations transformed public understanding of the environment surrounding Archbishop Keough High School during the late 1960s, and eventually attention returned to Cathy's murder. A question began to emerge. Had Cathy learned something she was never supposed to know? The theory, one of the most controversial elements of the story, came from Joan Hargadon Weiner. She stated that after suffering abuse, she had confided in Cathy. According to her account, Cathy listened and cared. Years later, Wenner alleged that Father Maskell had once taken her to see Cathy's body before it was officially discovered by authorities. She believed it was intended as a warning, a message about what could happen to anyone who spoke out. The allegation was shocking. It suggested a possible connection between the abuse claims and Cathy's death. However, investigators never established proof that such a connection existed. No court ever determined that Maskell was responsible for Cathy's murder. No criminal charges linked him to the killing. Even so, the allegations dramatically changed how many people viewed the case. The possibility that Cathy's death might have intersected with a broader pattern of abuse became a central focus of public interest. For former students, the search for answers intensified. The women who refused to let go decades after Cathy's murder, two former students became determined to keep the case alive. Gemma Hoskins and Abby Schaub had never forgotten their teacher. They remembered her kindness. They remembered the shock of her disappearance, and they believed the truth had never fully emerged. Their efforts began with research. They examined documents. They tracked down witnesses. They spoke with former classmates. What started as personal curiosity evolved into a years-long investigation. Social media gave them a platform. Online communities allowed people connected to the case to share information. New conversations emerged. Old memories resurfaced. The women became central figures in the search for justice. Their persistence would eventually attract national attention. The documentary. In 2017, director Ryan White released The Keepers. The 7-part documentary series introduced millions of viewers to Cathy's story. At first glance, it appeared to be a classic true crime investigation, an unsolved murder, a victim remembered fondly, a mystery stretching across decades. But the series expanded far beyond a homicide case. The documentary explored allegations of clergy abuse. It examined institutional responses. It focused heavily on survivors and their experiences. Many viewers expected a murder mystery. What they encountered was a broader examination of trauma, accountability, and silence. The emotional center of the series became the voices of former students. Women who had spent years carrying painful memories finally spoke publicly. For many viewers, those testimonies became the most powerful part of the story. The investigation revisited the documentary, renewed public interest in the murder. Journalists revisited old evidence. Researchers reviewed timelines. Authorities faced renewed pressure to examine unanswered questions. Over the years, various theories emerged. Some focused on Father Joseph Maskell. Others explored entirely different suspects. Several names surfaced through tips and independent investigations. Some leads appeared promising. Others collapsed under scrutiny. DNA testing was conducted on certain pieces of evidence. No definitive match solved the case. Again and again, investigators encountered the same obstacle: insufficient proof. The passage of time had complicated everything. Witnesses had died. Memories had faded. Physical evidence was limited. Even so, the renewed attention ensured that Cathy's case would not disappear. The Archdiocese. As public scrutiny increased, attention also turned toward the Catholic Church. Numerous allegations involving clergy abuse emerged across the United States during the following decades. Baltimore became part of that larger conversation. Former students argued that institutions often prioritize reputation over transparency. Church officials denied various allegations over the years while also facing growing criticism regarding historical responses to abuse claims. The debate extended far beyond Cathy's murder. It became a broader discussion about accountability. The documentary did not claim to solve every question. Instead, it documented the experiences of survivors and highlighted concerns about secrecy within powerful institutions. The human cost. At the heart of The Keepers are the people affected by these events. Survivors who spent years trying to understand what happened. Families seeking closure. Former students searching for answers about a teacher they loved. Many participants described carrying emotional burdens for decades. Some struggled to be believed. Others struggled simply to speak. The documentary devoted significant attention to those experiences. The result was not just an investigation into a crime. It became a portrait of a community still living with unresolved pain. Every lead, every interview, every recollection All of it reflected the lasting impact of events that began in 1969. New developments' interest in the case continued after the documentary's release. Investigators examined additional information. Journalists reported new allegations connected to individuals who had previously been part of the story. Meanwhile, broader investigations into clergy abuse in Maryland produced significant findings regarding decades of misconduct and institutional failures. For some observers, these developments reinforced long-standing concerns. For others, they highlighted how much remains unknown. Despite years of work, no one has been charged with Cathy's murder. The case remains officially unsolved. Ending more than half a century has passed since Sister Cathy Cesnik disappeared. The young teacher who inspired so many students never received justice in a courtroom. Her killer has never been identified. The mystery remains open. Yet the keepers ensured that Cathy would not be forgotten. The documentary transformed a cold case into a national conversation. It introduced new generations to a woman remembered for her kindness and courage. It amplified the voices of survivors who spent years seeking recognition. And it forced difficult questions about power, secrecy, and accountability. Perhaps the most striking aspect of the story is not what has been solved. It is what remains unanswered. Who killed Cathy Cesnik? Was her death connected to something larger? How much was known, and by whom? Decades later, those questions still linger. The files remain open. The theories continue. The search for truth goes on. And somewhere within the gaps between memory, evidence, and time, the final chapter of Sister Cathy's story remains unwritten.